Well, good morning, everybody. I found myself this morning thinking a lot about how the recent systems that have rolled across the country are going to start to eat away at the U.S. drought kind of picture. And we're going to get a new drought update here in a few hours this morning after I record this. And I'm just showing you here the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. So this includes everything. Snow melted down. It's the total number, but it's represented in inches of liquid equivalent. Now, it's very clear that there have been places that have missed out nearly entirely on the moisture. And those places primarily are parts of the northern plains, getting up here into the high plains and western plains, including big sections of Wyoming and Montana, and then parts of the southwest. Now, there's been some moisture in the southwest, but we've not yet kind of returned to that really strong subtropical flow coming off the Pacific to deliver just powerhouse systems throughout California and into the Four Corners states. But some of the areas we've been discussing that have been in such deep drought all fall, like I'm thinking about the southern tier of the United States, the lower Mississippi Valley. We've been keeping a close eye on the Mississippi River, which still this morning is 2 feet below low stage at Memphis. Those areas have picked up quite a bit of moisture, and some places, along with some very violent, severe weather, which we've been covering here. But you can see that the total amount of precipitation in the last 7 days, stretching from Louisiana up to North Carolina, in fact, all the way up here to like Boston and even farther north, has been 3 to 6 inches of rain. The snow that fell before this, a lot of that has melted, and we've put on top of it heavy rain, creating a flood problem. And the Northwest has picked up, as you can see here, our highest amounts, but this is typical, the flow coming right in here into the mountains. This is one of the wettest spots in the whole country during its wet season, which is right now. Now, I keep all this into the broader context of where does this land us by spring? And my biggest concern for the 2024 growing season, once we get into spring, is what was made in terms of a recovery. So I'm going to think about this in a couple different ways. When we add it to the previous system, that big one that happened at the end of 2023, the one that was right around Christmas, notice how much of the central U.S. is looking at 200 to 300% of normal rainfall or normal total precipitation. While just to the west of there, we have many places that are in this 30 to 50% range. I'm talking about kind of the Great Basin, pockets of the Pacific Northwest, and parts of the northern plains and getting into the Canadian prairie, which isn't represented on this map. We've seen this area kind of being eroded in terms of the depth of how dry it's been, but we still need quite a bit more. And there is more moisture coming into this area, including the risk of some snow once the colder air finally dives into the Mid-South this weekend. But the East Coast, extremely wet, and we're going to watch this continue to get wetter here in the near term. All right, I want to flip this script over to talking about snow. This was through 6 p.m. Central Time last night. We're just looking at the last 3 days of total accumulated snow. Some places in the Cascade Mountains added another 30 to 36 inches of snow. Decent snows in the upper Rockies here. And then again, we've kind of captured the big winter storm, the first of 2 big winter storms this week that has moved across parts of the Midwestern United States. Now, we have some light snow in place right now, and we're about to watch this next system race out of the panhandles. But I want to do a little bit more with this analysis before I get into that. I want to show you the western snowpack data. This has now really started to come up. Remember, these numbers were down here in the 30 to 40% range a week ago. We're now up in, the 60s and 70s. So to see this recovery happening is great. We've got more snow on the way. In fact, this whole area is about to get targeted again with a lot of snow. So this is the basin average snow water equivalent, and it is, it's kind of giving us a comparison. It's a percentage compared to the 1991 to 2020 median. So I look to see this map change quite a bit here still with the next systems that are going to be rolling through. But as I look at the season-to-date percent of normal snowfall, so this was through yesterday midday, kind of the area that's been hit multiple times. Because remember, I have to go back and look. Was it an October or a November snowstorm that hit Kansas first? And then we had the second one that came through here around Christmas, and now we've hit it again pretty hard. So when you just look at how much snow has fallen, this isn't how much is on the ground, but how much has fallen. We got places in here that are 400 to 600% above normal on snow. And I've got another system that's rolling through this same area. Unlike a year ago with the northern plains, the upper Midwest were just blanketed in snow, we're still sitting in deficit. And the same thing could be said for the difference between this year out west as well. So I wanted to kind of do that comparison. This is just snow depth across the country, and we're just looking to see where there is snow. And I'm going to show it to you compared to a year ago. So notice the color change throughout the west. Look at the upper Midwest and the northern plains. So this is this year versus a year ago. Certainly that storm track has shifted south. That's actually a very El Nino characteristic to shift the entire storm track farther to the south. But currently, as of today, or yesterday, we've got huge sections of Wyoming and Montana and North Dakota, South Dakota, and then look at this section right in through here in parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin that are snow-free. And then compared to a year ago, watch the West. This is this year and last year. We'd already seen that massive storm system, the one that happened in early or late December, early January, just pack these mountains up with lots and lots of snow all the way here into the interior. So it's just kind of a good comparison to kind of keep us grounded in where we've been recently, and we compare it to a year ago. All right, the other thing I'm thinking about with all of this snow is last year's major snows that came into the upper Midwest and northern plains, right in through here, did not have soils that were just solidly frozen. And I'm using a model, so this is not an actual observed number, but this is looking at the 4-inch soil temperature as of early this morning, 6 a.m. And this is where our freezing line is. Now we know about the bitterly cold air that is coming in, but it's important to note how all of that snow that just fell in parts of Iowa is going to be just critical if and when it does melt to get in here, because even with all this cold air that's coming in over the top of that new snowpack, the soil temperatures will likely not change very much. The snow is very insulating. And I'm only thinking about this with respect to undoing just long-standing drought issues. And I'm just thinking about Iowa because I was there yesterday overall with this kind of upcoming change in the soil moisture conditions. So important aspect to snow is that soil temperature, and I just wanted to show it to you. Now, there's no denying the cold air that's coming in, and I had to record a little early this morning. I'm heading down to southern Illinois today to talk to a group, and pretty excited about it, but glad I'm beating this. This is some really, really cold air that is coming out of Western Canada. At 4 a.m. this morning, we had temperatures, -4, -5 across Montana, negative single digits here in the Dakotas, and this is going to just continue to plow down south over the next 5 to 7 days, and we'll get this all the way down to central Florida and eclipse the Gulf here. It's going to get pretty far to the south. And just watching this, I'm going to take you to some satellite data. So this is what we're seeing. So weak system here, big system following it. And we could kind of get a glimpse of some of that snow under the satellite data. You can see a lot of clear ground right in through here under this, and that's important. But this will be changing. In fact, the system that's going to come in on the nose of the really cold air will start to deliver snow that probably could stretch from parts of the southern plains into the mid-south and eventually here up into parts of the mid-Atlantic. Now that flash you just saw was that I got a new image, but I want to take a little different look at this. I want to go to the water vapor imagery. Now remember, we kind of discussed this several times over the last few years, but we often use this to kind of trace out the behavior of the atmosphere. And what I watch for in developing systems are these features. Now what you've got right there, we commonly call this a baroclinic leaf. It looks more like a feather to me, but right ahead of big deepening systems, we get this opening up of the transport of moisture into the upper atmosphere. And it's indicative of rising motion. So the darker colors is where the atmosphere is sinking, and the brighter colors are where it's rising. And this next low is going to sweep through, and it's going to be another major snow producer in parts of the Midwest coming out of the plains. Dynamically, it's got a lot of support. Now take a look at this. This is through Thursday, midday, getting into Thursday night. On the southern side of it, see the trough here with the strong winds around its base plus the subtropical jet support. This is what's going to increase our severe weather risk here tonight, and then tomorrow it's going to translate farther to the east. But this system will initially dig based upon that really strong flow that's coming over the top of the Rocky Mountains. But as it digs down here on Friday, how much farther to the south were we able to get this trough? Well, that'll determine where the snow is. And it didn't get much farther than the previous model runs. So what ends up happening is just like the last two systems, the dig is west and then the lift is east, meaning that this is going to keep pushing that rain snow line farther and farther to north, making it a very difficult call right around like I-70 as an example, and even farther to the north than that. Now behind this, so that system's going to roll out Friday into Saturday, probably producing blizzard conditions centered around Chicago, but in this whole area right in through here, very strong winds with this. We then are going to watch on Saturday into Sunday, another little wave that's going to try to move through and setting us up for next Monday, Tuesday. So see this one? Now notice the difference. The flow comes down, no strong winds at the base of the trough, but they're out here in the exit of the trough. So what's the point? The point is that if you want to develop yet another deep low right here, which is normally where they form if the trough axis is located like that, you've got to have the strong winds here, but this is the wrong setup. The major difference is, look at the tilt of this trough. Now, what am I saying here? Well, the previous ones, let's go back and look at the previous one. What direction is it tilted? Like that. So it's going to lift east, pulling toward the north and east. This next one is digging, but doesn't have the same support. The flow is not lined up, ideally, to drop the pressure like a rock, like these last two systems have done. So this digs in, but it's on the nose of cold air. The tilt is positive. Positively tilted troughs dig, and they bring cold air. And the question will be on the southern side of this, where do we set up ice and where do we set up snow? And that system's going to roll through. And then the European model says, you know what? Next Thursday, Friday, drop in another one. And then after that, it's going to be all about the jet extension here and how this plays out with a bit of a drier week for the midsection of the country, a little wetter for the west, and what that all means translating into that last week of January, which I think is going to go back over active again. So with all of that being said, this morning, 4:15 a.m., we do not have a single state in the lower 48 that doesn't have some sort of weather watch advisory or warning. And as we look at it, again, it's a lot of wind. Big area of winter storm warning in through here, winter storm watch out ahead of it. We can see still the flooding problems east after all of that severe weather and then the heavy rains that came through. And this is all wind chill watches, warnings, advisories, just the brutally cold air. West, winter storm watches here. We can also see the winter storm warnings that are in place throughout our mountains. California is still cold, very windy south. I mean, this is just an incredibly active setup. Every state in the country touched by some sort of weather watch or advisory or warning at this point. So a couple of things to bring right away to the beginning of this. Tonight, the severe weather risk, the Storm Prediction Center has identified a bit of a larger area from Texas, parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi that's got to watch out for the risk of severe storms. It's a multi-hazard threat, so there's enough shear to create tornadoes. There's plenty of wind to produce straight-line wind damage. These storms will likely even be able to produce some hail. And then tomorrow we hit the same area again that was hit with the most recent system with over 400 reports of severe weather. So this would be round 2 for some nasty weather. Please be ready and weather aware in these areas. These wintertime systems move fast. They're very strongly forced, and as a result, they can produce very quickly changing conditions. Please keep an eye on it. I can give you my best representation on the timing of this. I like the high-res NAM on that. There's a lot of things about the NAM that it doesn't do well, but overall it gives us a decent picture in winter what to expect. So here we go. Let's just play this through this morning. Got that first little, it's almost like a clipper-like system that rolls out of part of the upper Midwest here over to the eastern Great Lakes, some light snow. This is noon today. Getting into this evening, you can already see as I rock back and forth. See the moisture transport here? Already getting the cloud cover in the showers. And by tonight, that's where we're going to start to watch this area light up with strong to severe storms. It could be a later event in the evening, of course, after dark, so we'll watch that very carefully. But already we can see the snow on the northern side of this next system. Now, you know it started here, but it's lifting. The trough is lifting, the system lifts, and so the greens represent rain. And that means for Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and points south, this is a system that starts off with rain. And the trick will be to find where the transition area is. Now, some of the models, like the GFS, bring it much farther to the south. The Europeans, kind of a blend of this. The NAM is much farther to the north with its advection of warmer air. As we just watch it, you'll see a lot of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio picking up rain initially. It'll be very tricky to watch northern Indiana, northern Ohio, northern Illinois. And this is by 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Chicago, again, fourth busiest airport in the world. I'll have to go back and look that up, but I mean, this is going to be a mess early in the morning on Friday. And then again, after this passes through, the winds on the backside, very strong. The risk of blizzard conditions showing up at the National Weather Service are pretty apparent here. And then here's the high pressure that's building in. So this could be another setup where the low pressure center, as it moves over Illinois and Indiana, could drop down there into the 980s. And we're going to follow this with high pressure of a 1040 to 1050 high with cold air that's going to come in. That's millibars, all right? Now watch the northwest after this one rolls through the Great Lakes and pulls through New England there. A lot of snow on the backside, very cold, very windy. The cold is now racing itself down here, and the next system comes plowing into Oregon and Northern California. Now that's been the spot the European model's been trying to place this next system, for a while. And what I'm getting concerned about is here with enough cold air. So that cold air is going to kind of have I don't know if I drew a line that kind of just illustrates where I think it'll be. I'm worried that it's going to undercut part of the Willamette Valley here, increasing the risk of some ice. We've got to look at that here a couple of different ways. So let's look at the probability of getting 2 inches of snow over the next 72 hours from the WPC, the Weather Prediction Center. And you've got your eye on the map here. Let's step it up to 4 inches. So that's a probability of 4 inches. Here's the color bar. So very high probabilities here, and then throughout the Cascades and the North Central Rockies here. As we step this up to 8, we're really going to keep an eye coming out of Iowa into northern Illinois, Wisconsin, northern Indiana, and most of Michigan here. Again, risk is starting to increase in my mind for the National Weather Service to issue a blizzard warning in this area. If we take this up to a foot, we're going to keep an eye on that corridor here, getting into Ontario. Then outside of that, it's going to be the Cascades. So if we just keep going up, there's 18 inches. And might as well just look at all of them. There's 24, and here's 30. So another 30 inches are possible here. On the freezing rain side of this, if I could click that, there we go. 72-hour probability of getting 1/10 of an inch. And now we start to see that part of the I-5 corridor, the Willamette Valley, really kind of showing up here as this next system comes in this weekend. So be very aware of the icing risk that's going to, sorry about that. Very sensitive screen. But be very aware of the icing threat in this area. Okay, next, we did this yesterday, so let's just follow it up again. I want to show you where the cluster of lows is. So tonight, coming out of the Panhandles, dipping south, hooking south, going over almost Little Rock. But from Little Rock, because the trough is negatively tilted, it's going to lift through southern Illinois, almost come right over the top of where I live, just outside of Champaign, and then get right here into parts of Indiana. It's at this point that it's going to have its best support. It's going to be rapidly deepening, and some of the models are projecting a sub 980 low, so 980 millibars. That's another very, very deep low. You know, the previous one was breaking records in this area for low pressure. So that one's going to go right into southern Michigan and exit through parts of Ontario, and then there's the high pressure that follows it. The system that comes in early next week has to ride the southern side of this. And that's what's going to give us our risk of bringing snow into the Mid-South, snow into the Mid-Atlantic, and maybe some ice into Texas on this system here. So that was just to kind of confirm that the models kept overall the position of this next low coming here across the midsection of the country. So let's go ahead and have a look at it from the newest GFS versus the European outlook. We're going to let this start off on Thursday night when that low is right here over the Four Corners states. So as we get into early Friday morning, this is Friday at 6 a.m., we then play into midday Friday and then Friday evening. So I mentioned to you it was the GFS that made a quickest transition over to snow here in parts of Indiana, Ohio, and Illinois. The European keeps the rain farther to the north and a bit longer, but overall, pretty good positioning on this. Don't forget, please do not forget to the south. Thursday night and then getting into Friday, the risk of severe storms racing to the east out of this system. Friday night right into this area. Heavy rains out ahead of it. So that low pulls through Michigan. Very strong winds. Look at the spacing of the isobars here. And this rolls into Ontario and in through Quebec and then finally exits, with its rain into New England. Lifting systems bring rain north. That's all there is to think about this. Now, at that point, the GFS is coming to better alignment with the European. Remember, yesterday the GFS brought all that rain and snow to Washington. It's now aligned back up with the European model. We can see the heaviest snows from the Blue Mountains here to the Southern Cascades getting into the mountains that surround the Snake River Valley. We're also going to add some up here in the Sierra Nevada. Now, that low comes out, but it doesn't eject over the mountains the same way as the previous do because there is a big area of cold air here, and that high pressure is going to shove this thing pretty far to the south. Now, notice the difference in the models. The GFS by 6 p.m. on Sunday is already putting down a lot of snow in this area and ice into Texas. European's a bit slower. You see it over here at 6 p.m. on Sunday. There it is by 12 a.m. Monday. There's 6 a.m. Monday, getting into noon on Monday, and now we got that risk. It's a full day later here, so let's just call it Sunday, Monday. We're going to have to watch parts of Texas for the risk of ice. It's showing up more later in the European than it is in the GFS. Snow here, possibly getting down in Oklahoma, Arkansas, right over the top of like Memphis. And then we expect to see that spreading through into parts of the Appalachian Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains, and eventually maybe over toward DC. That's a European solution. A little bit different in the GFS, but we can still kind of look and see that they're both producing a system there. Now, how that snow carries midweek next week into New England is all going to be dependent on how far to the east and south the cold air makes it, and then that trajectory of this low that's kind of trying to roll around the southern edge of that really cold air. But there is the risk that we could get snow all the way out to like Cape Cod with this, all along the I-5 and east of that with this next system. Now, by next Wednesday, we're already watching another one come into the Pacific Northwest. So this isn't really slowing down, and the European model wants to toss yet another low here by next Friday. It's not quite fully resolved in the GFS model. So that kind of walks us through the models. Let's now put down some numbers, and we're going to start with the GFS on snow. So I'm just going to walk you through this, playing through Saturday and Sunday, watching system number 2 come out here Sunday, Monday, spreading some snow in this corridor. But this is going out a week. That's the GFS solution on total snowfall. Same thing, but nationally here from the European model. That's through Saturday and Sunday. System number, I guess this is technically system number 4 if we keep count from the beginning, but whatever. The one that's coming down here, adding snow from Oklahoma and Arkansas, spreading it down here from parts of southern Arkansas right along this corridor into the mid-Atlantic. That takes you out a full week on the European. So places in the Cascades still capable of another 36 to 48 inches of snow. And we're going to watch this corridor most carefully for the risk of that blizzard conditions, but more snow adding over Iowa, Nebraska, parts of Kansas, and we're getting that next system farther to the south. In terms of ice, remember this weekend on Saturday into Sunday, I'm watching right here. This part of Oregon, is really, it's really starting to see pretty sizable amounts of ice. This could be quite damaging to this area. Please be weather aware here. And then the next system, again, we've kind of identified this corridor really right in through here, extending into parts of the kind of the region we can get some cold air damming in Virginia and North Carolina. Okay, some probability maps. Who's going to see snow? Let's just do that. So this is the chance over the next 10 days of getting an inch. So probability of an inch of snow. If we then step this up to 3 inches, we get that. 6 inches looking for the heaviest snowfall. Here's our probability map. Let's go up to a foot. So again, we're going to watch very carefully here, and then of course throughout the west. And here's 18 inches. So that's a 10-day outlook. Now once we get out there to day 10 and beyond, what we're going to be paying attention to is a jet extension. And remember, when the jet extends across the Pacific like this, it tends to break along the west coast. Northwest flow, subtropical goes underneath it. We've reviewed this quite a bit. If the jet retracts, which watch what's going to happen. This is the 20th through the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. We end up getting back to what we would want for more active weather. So the retraction occurred. The split now happens here. We get this flow that comes in and back out of the southwest, meaning that once we get out there past about the 22nd, 23rd, we should probably expect the last 7 or 8 days of the year to produce another big U.S. winter storm system. Question is are we going to be able to get enough cold air in place ahead of it for that to happen? That's kind of challenging during an El Nino year. So what are we looking at in terms of week 2? Well, all 3 models have a little bit different solution on this, but the European model and the CPC are most closely aligned. The GFS has been out to lunch with the West, so I don't want to look at it. You can see that these 2 maps look similar, so I'll show you the CPC map. We're going to start to open things back up from the Gulf, pulling moisture into Texas, while the West brings on the southern branch of that jet stream, while the East gets a bit of a chance to dry out. And there's not going to be a lot of folks that won't welcome this, a little bit of a slowdown. But I still think 23rd through the 30th, we're going to crank off another system in the midsection of the country. On the topic of temperatures, the newest update on who's going to be getting a frost, you can now see how far to the south the coldest air will extend. And just like we did yesterday, I want to show you these minimum temperatures. So this was this morning. This now gets into Friday morning. Wow, look at the difference. Minus 24 to almost 60 degrees down here. So from that into Friday, from Friday into Saturday, minus 33. And that cold air continues to extend on Saturday, getting into Sunday and Monday. And Tuesday, that'll probably be one of the greater extent days on the cold. Low temperatures all the way down to like Brownsville, 25, Corpus Christi, 25. We'll see lows struggling to get above -10 in the midsection of the country. And then this is going to be Wednesday of next week. Now, with the jet extension, we're going to start to flood the west with a bit more mild air. And that's why the day 5 through 10 starts to show that. And we expect day 10 through 15 to kind of break away from the really cold conditions overall. Now, a little bit on the longer range. I'm still working on some ideas here. I do want to show you this. There is support for that idea in the European model. I just showed you the GFS. There's day 5 through 10. Here's day 10 through 15. But what I'm watching is, the MJO, these phase diagrams are a bit misleading, but if it is moving through this side of the diagram, that's milder air. That's just milder air for North America. This is the cold side. So is it going to get back there? Well, if I look at this corridor of rising motion, you could make a statement that while we're going to spend some time coming through 3, 4, 5, it'll eventually get to 6, 7, 8, and 1, which is down here. And that progression is going to be really, really important for the return of an active storm period for the United States. And then it's also going to be really important for South America, because this is the drier stretch we're going to go into for South America. See how that sinking air is going to sit right on top of this geographically? But then do we return late in the month, better upper level support to bring the rains back on? I've been very concerned about that. So let's kind of walk through a couple of things. This is a 1-week sliding window from the European ensemble that runs out 45 days. So this is that time period leading up to like the 22nd. We see it breaking away for that last week of January. So this is when I'm expecting something to pop out here and give us that one last big system at the end of January. Then the model says, take it back to full on, El Nino look. So what is that? Drier here, drier there, wetter here, wetter there. That's really what it's trying to do for the beginning of February. We're just going to have to watch how that all plays out. A temperature forecast out this far is going to be useless. I mean, no model is going to be able to pin it down. So I'm just trying to use these models to get an idea on the precip. So here's the big thing I need you to know. I've told you that El Nino's plateaued. There's more and more evidence that it is on its way out. And you see this large area of blue in through here? That is all where the winds are now anomalously stronger out of the east. So instead of these westerly wind bursts that happened, the trade winds have now picked back up. If you want to see El Nino's building past the beginning of a new year, this all has to be red, and it's not, meaning that this El Nino is likely starting to make its fade. Now, I was talking to a group last night in Australia, and I pulled up the Bureau of Meteorology's website, and I want to point out a couple of things about their newest forecast. Where they currently sit on the strength of their El Nino is about 2 degrees C. Remember that they were projecting almost up to 3 degrees C. So while it's still a decent and strong El Nino, it's nowhere near what originally predicted. Now, they've got a slower fade on El Nino through May, June, and July. But I want to show you the model differences. So this is the Australians, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the US, and the British. And this is the average. January, ocean temperatures still well out here in El Nino conditions. Let's go to February, and then into March, and then into April. We've already got the Canadians and NOAA predicting a pretty quick demise by April of El Nino back to neutral. And by May, the Canadians are aggressively trying to develop the CANCIPS model into La Nina, It's only the Australians, the Europeans, and the French that are keeping this slower progression, with NOAA right now moving into neutral, but the negative neutral side of things. So this will be front of mind for the next several months. We'll come back to it and keep talking about it. Now, from there, I'm not sure why I pulled up this map, so let's skip it and get to this. I want to show you what's going on in South America. Got some new data from the ERA 5 analysis, and I want to talk about Argentina. So this bounding box, if we look up here, or look down here, a year ago, it was the second driest October, November, December on record. And right now, they are just a hair above average on precipitation. So this is average, the line in the middle. These are therefore anomalies. So we went from here to here in Argentina. And I bring this up because you've probably heard lately about some of the numbers that are being projected for the Argentine crop. And it's being supported by wet conditions. Let's do the same thing, though, for this center-west growing area. And this is now October, November, December. And if you add all 3 months together, it is now the driest 3-month stretch in the Era 5 record, which goes all the way back to the beginning of World War II. So it's just important to see here what happened. Now, we know lately, in January, this is October, November, December, in January, rains came back. And this is my last 14 days of satellite estimated rainfall. And while there was some places here picking up, 6 to 10 inches of rain, southern Brazil was a bit drier. We question how much this helped the earliest planted soybean crops, which need to be getting harvested right now. And the kind of answer I get from a lot of folks is it doesn't help, but it's helping the later planted crop. Now south into into Argentina, very heavy rainfall has hit here. And we see that over the next week, we're expecting even more wet weather down in Argentina, while the MJO brings in a drier stripe of air right in through this part of Brazil. Now you notice as I just play this out to show you week 2, we begin to see this recovery of moisture. And the big thing I'm continuing to worry about is at the end of January and beginning of February when we need to be doing harvest, does this corridor get soaked with rain, delaying the harvest a little bit further? So that'll be what we'll watch. I'll keep you posted on it. I really appreciate your attention again today. We'll talk again very soon. Thanks.